Hello, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine. Here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the evening of December 9, 2023 in the United States, the morning of December 10, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, Hamas released a video today of one of the Israelis that had kidnapped on October 7th, 25-year-old Shakar, in which he states that he has been held captive for 40 days and wants to go home. This means the video was taken at least 3 weeks ago. In the video, after the image is shown of him speaking, his bloodied picture is shown, and Hamas claims that he died in a failed rescue attempt of the IDF. The IDF also confirmed today that he is in fact dead. Hamas is likely referring to a report that came in yesterday about a failed rescue attempt of the IDF, in which 2 IDF soldiers were badly injured as they attempted to rescue hostages in the Gaza Strip. In the report the IDF gave yesterday, it stated that they had stormed an area where intelligence had said that hostages were being kept, that Hamas fighters involved in the October 7th attack and had been involved in holding hostages were killed, but no hostages were rescued. So it is likely that Hamas is referencing this attempt yesterday. Unclear if in fact Shakar was killed in this rescue attempt, or if Hamas is just using it in order to justify his killing. Either way, the IDF is also confirming that he is in fact dead. In addition, today in a protest that took place in Israel, hostages that were released from captivity in the truce that occurred last week already reported about their conditions in captivity. They stated that each day in captivity is hell, reported extremely harsh conditions, including lack of medical supplies. One woman said that she had an oxygen machine that was taken away from her, and they were also reported a big shortage of food. They all called upon the Israeli government to prioritize releasing Israeli hostages over anything else. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, there were rockets and mortars sent from the Gaza Strip primarily towards the southern parts of Israel, although substantially less than in recent days. Rockets and mortars targeted the areas of Nir Oz, Magen, Kfar Aza, Nir Yitzchak, Nir Am, Miflasim, Nachal Oz, and Alumim, among others. Moving on to the fighting within the Gaza Strip specifically, the bulk of the fighting took place in Jabalia refugee camp and Sajaiya up north, as well as in Han Yunis down south. In Jabalia refugee camp, there were substantial gun battles reported between different Hamas units and the IDF throughout the entire camp. In addition, after it was reported yesterday that several dozen Hamas operatives were seen surrendering to the IDF and being taken back to Israel for questioning, similar videos came out today showing, again, a bulk of Palestinians that are surrendering to the IDF, some of them laying down their weapons and being taken back to Israel. According to the IDF spokesperson, the interrogation of those Palestinians that are already surrendered generates the image in which Hamas operatives in the field are in great distress, and according to the IDF spokesperson, the Hamas leadership is in complete denial of reality despite being informed of what is happening on the ground, and that the Hamas operatives that are in the field are stating that there is a disconnect between what the leadership is saying underground and what is going on above ground. Moving on to the Sajaiya area, a mass weapons cache was located within the camp by the IDF. It included weapons, RPGs, mortars, as well as an IDF military jeep that had been stolen on October 7th. In addition, there were substantial gun battles throughout the neighborhood, including many face-to-face confrontations between the IDF and Hamas operatives. Hamas fired on IDF forces from a school in the neighborhood that was eventually taken over by the IDF. The IDF also published footage from the school in which it showed sniper guns and ammunition that were hidden within stuffed animal areas in the different kindergartens. In other activities in the area, several different tunnel entrances were uncovered and destroyed. Moving down south towards the Han Yunis area, ongoing confrontations are continuously reported between IDF forces both in the heart of Han Yunis as well as the IDF forces that are besieging and surrounding the town. The IDF reported that it took over a mosque that Hamas had been using for a staging ground and was firing upon soldiers in the northeastern outskirts of Han Yunis. Other intensive battles were reported in the Beit Hanun area in the north of the Gaza Strip, with gun battles occurring in UNRWA schools and a mosque that Hamas operatives were held up within. In other news, Palestinian sources reported today that Iyad al-Tahawari, who is a colonel in Hamas's police force, was assassinated by the IDF in an airstrike against his apartment in Rafah. The IDF did not put out any statement about this. Other news, Palestinian banks, in a reported complex operation involving both Israeli approval and UN support, managed to salvage 180 million new Israeli shekels in bills that had been buried under the rubble in the north of parts of the Gaza Strip. According to the reports, they then, under safeguard and under the auspices of the IDF, transferred these bills to banks in southern parts of the Gaza Strip in order to help ease the humanitarian crisis and specifically also the lack of cash that the banks in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip are facing. Regarding casualties, 5 IDF soldiers are reported killed in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of IDF soldiers killed since the invasion began to 102, and 13 are reported badly injured in the last 24 hours. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, upwards of 17,700 Palestinians have been killed since the war began, as well as 48,780 that have been injured. There's also reports at least 8,000 Palestinians that are missing, considered buried under the rubble, and likely presumed dead. Relating to the casualties list, the head of Israel's National Security Council, Tzachi Hanegbi, today stated that in his assessment, over 7,000 Hamas operatives have been killed and that number is conservative. This relates to different numbers that are being reported about how many Hamas operatives out of the amount of Palestinians have been killed. He is stating 7,000. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the IDF again called today upon all Palestinian civilians that are remaining in the northern areas to evacuate down south, specifically in the Jabalia refugee camp, Sajaiya, Zaytun, as well as the old city of Gaza. They warned civilians not to take the Salah ad-Din road, which in the past was a humanitarian corridor. They stated that now that is a war zone because it goes directly through Khan Yunis, and that an additional corridor bypassing Khan Yunis will be opened. Other news relating to the humanitarian situation, the Nasser hospital in the southern parts of Gaza Strip today announced it has lost control of the situation due to the rising number of injured people and the internally displaced people from the north that have taken refuge in the hospital. The head of the hospital specifically stated that people are waiting days for surgeries and the number of infections and contaminations is out of control. In addition, there were substantial reportages of food shortage that is emerging within the different refugee camps that are sprawling up in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, primarily in the Rafah area, and that mounting lines for humanitarian aid and food are seen by Palestinians. They are reporting extremely small portions of food that are given to entire families. There was also additional reports that safe and clean drinking water is becoming more and more scarce, and among others, this is due to the dysfunction of decontamination plants in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and the inoperation of the plants in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip due to a lack of fuel. Related to this, the IDF today published drone footage taken from Sajaiya in the northern parts of Gaza Strip, showing Hamas operatives stopping a pickup truck of Palestinian civilians, forcing everyone out and stealing their food and humanitarian aid. Relating to the enders of humanitarian aid, the UN is now pressuring Israel to fully open the Kerem Shalom crossing in order to allow humanitarian aid to flow into the Gaza Strip in a much faster way. So as of now, trucks that are coming in primarily from Jordan arrive at the Kerem Shalom crossing between Israel and the Gaza Strip. There they are inspected, then transferred to Egypt in order to enter through Rafah. The UN is now pressuring Israel to open the Kerem Shalom crossing to allow aid trucks to enter the Gaza Strip directly. IDF declared today a 4-hour humanitarian pause in the entire town of Rafah that occurred between the hours of 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. Regarding the entrance of aid trucks, the Palestinian Red Crescent reported that 100 trucks carrying food, water, and substantial medical supplies entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. There is no report regarding how many fuel trucks managed to enter after the reports that Israel is going to possibly double the amount of fuel trucks. No reports in the last 2 days regarding how much fuel actually did manage to enter. Moving on to the West Bank today, following Shabak intelligence, IDF soldiers attempted to arrest a Palestinian who had carried out a shooting attack yesterday. In a confrontation in the Dora area near Hebron, he pulled out a knife and injured an IDF soldier, and he was shot and killed. In addition to that, a Palestinian was also reported killed in the Azun area near Kalkilia in confrontations with the IDF, and a total of 8 Palestinians are reported arrested throughout the last 24 hours in the West Bank. Other news related to the West Bank, the Israeli expanded cabinet is due to meet tomorrow in order to discuss re-allowing the entry of Palestinian workers from the West Bank into Israel. As of October 7th, all work permits of Palestinians to enter Israel had been suspended. This means upwards of 100,000 Palestinian workers who earn a living in Israel. This has substantially affected those Palestinians and their families as well as the Israeli economy, and there's growing pressure within Israel to possibly allow them back in. Shabak is actually in favor of allowing Palestinian workers back in order to ease some of the social tension that is happening in the West Bank. However, different political figures, specifically Itamar Ben-Gvir, Minister of National Security, and Bezalel Smotrich, Minister of Finance in Israel, are both against the proposal to allow Palestinian workers back into Israel. In other news relating to Europe, Prime Ministers of Spain, Belgium, Ireland, and Malta all wrote a letter to the EU Commissioner today, calling on the EU to demand a permanent humanitarian ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, and in addition to freeze the assets of Israeli settlers committing violent acts against Palestinians in the West Bank. This is a growing trend ever since the United States announced that it was going to take actions against Israeli settlers that are involved in violent acts against Palestinians. After that, Germany announced that it would likely do the same thing. The EU is set to convene about this on Monday. Now these prime ministers are also calling on Europe to take similar actions. Likely this is going to continue and the pressure is going to mount on Israel to take action against Israelis carrying out terrorist acts against Palestinians in order to ease some of this diplomatic pressure. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, rockets and missiles were continuously sent from southern Lebanon towards Israel today. Rockets targeted the areas of Misgav Am in the Upper Galilee, Hardov and Malud in the Western Galilee. There were also mortars sent towards IDF outposts. One of them landed in an IDF outpost near Matat, badly injuring 2 IDF soldiers. The IDF retaliated against a wide range of Hezbollah targets throughout southern Lebanon. These included launching sites, military installations, and other infrastructure. The IDF later put out another announcement saying that it attacked one of the forward command centers of Hezbollah. However, it was not reported where this forward command center actually was. News relating to Syria. After it was reported yesterday that Israel carried out a retaliation against a Syrian target and that 4 people were killed, specifically because of missiles that were sent from Syria 2 days ago, today Syrian opposition reported that one of the 4 people who were killed in this attack that occurred in Quneitra is Hassan Dakduk, who is the son of Musa Dakduk. Musa Dakduk is a very prominent figure. He is the person who's a member of Hezbollah and in charge of their Golan division. The Golan division is the division that Hezbollah set up in Syria. He himself is a former military advisor to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard in Iraq and Yemen, and he also has a $1 million reward on his head for involvement in killing U.S. soldiers in Iraq. So, according to the reports, one of the people killed is his son. Unclear if possibly he's one of the other 4 that were killed, or if the attack was maybe targeting him, or if his son is another operative, or if this is entirely unrelated. Additional reports relating to Syria. There was a report today of a drone attack and an explosion that occurred in the El Miadin area near the Deir Azur area. The reports from the Syrian Human Rights Observatory stated that a command center of an Iranian militia was attacked, and that specifically this militia had been reinforced with different soldiers from Iraq coming in the past days. This relates to Iran trying to intensify its activity in the region, as has been seen elsewhere. Moving on to some of the regional developments, in a substantial threat escalation today, the Houthis in Yemen announced that they are going to attack any ship passing through the Red Sea that is destined for Israel. So if in the past the Houthis said they were going to attack Israeli ships, then they expanded that after they miscalculated and attacked a ship that was owned by an Israeli. Then they said they're going to attack any ship that is affiliated with Israel. Now the threat is that they're going to attack any ship that is destined for Israel, regardless of who the nationalities are. Spokesperson for the Houthi military, Yahya Saria, today stated, if Gaza does not receive the food and medicines it needs, any ship destined for Israeli ports passing through the Red Sea, regardless of their owner's citizenship, will become a target for our armed forces. Amidst this, Politico today reported there's growing frustration within U.S. officials at the Biden administration's underestimating the Houthi threat and not responding in harsher military ways. Additional reports elsewhere also stated that Israel sees the Houthi threat as credible and concrete, and that if a Houthi missile causes damage or death in Israel, Israel will have a hard time not reacting. The report also suggested that Israel is also growing increasingly frustrated that the United States is not reacting in a more military style towards the Houthis. Moving on to the political and general trends that occurred in the last 24 hours. After there's been a back and forth in the United States whether the United States has in fact set a deadline for Israel in terms of its support for the war, and 2 days ago it was reported that the U.S. said that there is no deadline, then Politico stated that the U.S. has actually set a hard deadline for Israel for the end of the year. Sources in the U.S. today stated that the U.S. has not given Israel a deadline for the end of the fighting, that the U.S. expects that by the beginning of the new year, Israel will move towards, I'm quoting, more low-intensity fighting. According to a report in the Israeli Ynet, American sources stated that the U.S. is aware that it will take Israel longer than that to actually annihilate Hamas, just like it took the U.S. years to destroy ISIS, but that Israel will not be able to maintain this level of attacks and bombings beyond the new year. Additional reports suggest that Prime Minister Netanyahu already agreed on this time frame with President Biden in their last conversation, stating that at the end of the year, Israel will turn to more low-level fighting. Other reports that in Israel there is growing concern that the United States will not use its veto power to prevent a future UN Security Council call for a ceasefire. After the U.S. did this 2 days ago, now there's growing concern in Israel that this will not happen again. The War Cabinet in Israel specifically was briefed on growing difficulties of the Biden administration to continue its unwavering support for Israel due to both internal political pressures as well as pressure from different Arab countries to end the war by the beginning of 2024. Other political news, Palestinian Authority Chairman Mahmoud Abbas today heavily condemned the U.S. veto at the UN Security Council, stating that the U.S. has become a partner to Israel's crimes and that it is responsible now for killing children in the Gaza Strip. Related to the convening of the Security Council, Iranian Foreign Minister today commended the UN Secretary General for activating Article 99 and convening the Security Council in relation to the war between Israel and Hamas, calling it a courageous move for international peace. He added that if the U.S. continues to support Israel, then a regional explosion is inevitable. In other news, the U.S. State Department today approved an Israeli request to buy 13,000 tank shells from the United States immediately, using a special clause that allows the State Department to bypass the need to get approval for this request from Congress. There is growing concern that if this were to be sent to Congress, there may be questions about the U.S. involvement in sending tank shells to Israel that then may be used in the Gaza Strip against civilians. However, the U.S. State Department activated a special clause and bypassed Congress in order to approve this sale. And finally, in other political news, Anthony Blinken today spoke with the head of the Red Cross and called on the Red Cross to again visit hostages remaining in the Gaza Strip and deliver medicines to them. Moving on to speculations regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, Prime Minister Netanyahu today stated that, like the United States, other countries need to realize that they cannot support the goal of destroying Hamas, while at the same time calling on Israel to stop the war. He stated, and I quote, "And thus Israel will continue its just war to annihilate Hamas and achieve the rest of the goals we have set out." And other news related to the future of the Palestinians, Al-Akhbar today, which was a Hezbollah affiliate, reported that despite vehement rhetoric in Egypt, Egypt is in fact expecting a mass uprooting of Palestinians towards Sinai in the first quarter of 2024. According to the report, Egypt is negotiating with other countries about their willingness to host Palestinians as well. The report suggested that Egypt is expecting hundreds of thousands to cross the border with their families, and that according to Egyptian plans, they will be dispersed throughout Egypt and given special status rather than all being concentrated and located within the Sinai Peninsula. The report added that the change in Egypt's position results from the fact that there is a growing assumption that Israel will continue to suffocate the Gaza Strip, that the war is not actually going to end by the beginning of 2024, and that the growing devastation is eventually going to lead Palestinians to burst through the border, and thus Egypt is trying to plan how this can happen in a more managed way. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.